Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, June 11th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, proprietor of the Daily Poster, David Sirota, will join us to look back on the week in politics. Then later, second hour, we'll be talking to Andrew Callaghan of Channel 5, or formerly All Gas and No Brakes. Meanwhile, Trump Justice Department secretly subpoenaed House Intel Democrats and staff and family. Now the Democrats are acting like they can't investigate it themselves. Meanwhile, speaking of House Dems, they're at it again. Bad faith attacks on Ilhan Omar. Meanwhile, the Gang of 10 supposedly have an infrastructure deal, which begs the question, so what? Meanwhile, Democrats grow that Biden is jettisoning climate change provisions in that same infrastructure bill. California appeals the strike down of its 30-year-old assault weapons ban. Texas governor claims he's building a wall. It's going to be a big, beautiful wall. And 6 3-percenters were indicted in the Capitol attack. Lastly, Amnesty International claims that Biden is illegally expelling thousands of unaccompanied minors at the U.S.-Mexico border. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Casual Friday. I am in a soft-collared shirt just to prove it. And, of course, here with me, as always, Emma Vigeland. Hello, Emma. How are you?
Hello. I'm also in a soft-collared shirt.
Oh, well, there you go. I to be honest with you, I can't really make out the collar.
It's that soft, right? It just kind of falls down. Yeah, droops. But it's certainly casual. And I went with the flannel because it's kind of cold.
It's kind of cold. All right.
No one cares. No one cares.
Yeah. Well, all right. No, I mean, I care. I just I'm a little surprised, but that's all right.
All right.
So let's get into this. We saw this, if people will recall, I guess now it was in 2018 when Ilhan Omar first got elected to Congress, and the Democrats had taken control of the House. She had made some statements that were fairly innocuous, certainly statements that were no different than we heard from people like Thomas Friedman and others over the years.
And even Donald Trump, because he said, we played this on the show yesterday, he basically said that, there are a lot of bad things that people in the United States have done, et cetera. But continue.
Yeah, I'm talking back in 2018. I think it was about the lobby. And so, but nevertheless, what happened was the Democrats and Democratic leadership piled on Ilhan Omar. I think there was a concern that there was a growing progressive caucus in the House. And they piled on in such a way that the rollout of their first piece of legislation a seminal cornerstone piece of legislation was completely overshadowed. And that legislation was H.R. 1, which in the Senate is now known as S1, which is also known as the For the People Act. And they wondered why no one paid attention to it, because they created all of these storylines by going after Ilhan Omar. And I can't help but think that the way they're going about this attack now by about a dozen or so Democrats, and then leadership came in with a sort of a gratuitous press release on this point, it is to cover up the fact that like the Democrats have completely stalled out. And but here is the right wing now picking up on it. Once the Democrats make an issue, here comes the right wing to amplify it. Here is Bill Hemmer, who's getting vapors over the fact that Ilhan Omar in any way was critical of the United States, as if, like you say, Donald Trump hadn't said the same thing.
At this letter, it's unbearable.
But she has so much support, too. Call for number 6, Rashida Tlaib sent this out. Freedom of speech doesn't exist for Muslim women in Congress, she writes. The benefit of the doubt doesn't exist for Muslim women. House Democratic leadership should be ashamed of its relentless, exclusive tone policing of Congresswomen of color. She talked about the United States in comparison with the Taliban. You know what the Taliban did to women in Afghanistan? This is reprehensible. Ilhan Omar, she was born in Somalia, raised in a refugee camp in Kenya, came to the United States, I think, at the age of 9. Can she ever fly the flag maybe just once for us?
Yeah, maybe.
It's so childish.
But who's the us?
Red-blooded Americans. Can't you just tuck us in with a warm glass of patriotism and give us a little kiss on the forehead, make us feel better?
But who's the us here? I mean, that's the thing, is that like here he is, the idea that, I mean, she is a United States Congresswoman, and I want to know like who the us is. Who is the us he's referring to? Natural, like American-born citizens? Is that what it is?
I feel like she's flying the flag for me.
Well, certainly. I mean, and you, Sam, you were saying that the Democratic Party first amplified it, right? And then, of course, right-wing media is going to pile on. To me, like there were some indications that right-wing media had picked up on her statement or her questioning of Blinken, but it was just not that big of a story. And of course, the Democrats, because they choose to respond to it, first it was the unofficial caucus of some of the Jewish members of Congress, including Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and then Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and Dem leadership gratuitously have to go after her. And I think it's even more insidious. They're cynically using a lot of the racially charged attacks against Ilhan Omar as a shield from their own position on this topic and other topics, and they're directing all of this energy at this person who's probably the most harassed member of their caucus and throwing her under the bus for no reason except for their own self-interest and cowardice. It's really stunning that they chose to jump on this statement of hers, which, you know, I thought they might have learned their lesson from 2 years ago. No, they're still doing it to this day.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is an attempt to, forestall anything that would happen at the international criminal courts. And the idea that that we're going to just sort of ignore these bodies is just absurd. And it is also, it comes at great cost for supposedly the Democratic agenda. Because, last time around was a good example of how it completely buried H.R. 1. We should have had 3 years of buildup for H.R. 1 to push this through, which it's not going to happen. For the People Act is dead in the water now because of a Democrat or 2, or maybe 4 or 5, for all we know, in the Senate. And it's just absurd. It's just absurd. And, you know, I guess we got to go through this every 3 or 4 years where they attack Ilhan Omar.
And and of course it's to obfuscate the fact that the United States and Israel, if comparing it to Hamas at the very least, have killed and committed a lot more atrocities just by body count. But all targeting of civilians should be condemned regardless of it. And Pelosi and Dem leadership, they're the ones drawing a false equivalence or trying to obfuscate. It's not Ilhan Omar.
Good point. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to David Sirota of the Daily Poster. Folks, just a reminder, this program relies on your support. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityReport.com. Sometimes we also have sponsors of the show. Today, one of our sponsors, Sunset Lake CBDs at sunsetlakecbd.com. Folks, the tincture helps me go to sleep every night. The fudge is delicious. The coffee is my weekend brew. The gummies are those are your favorites, Emma.
They're my favorites.
I can't do that because if I have one, I'll have like the whole bottle, and that's not.
I know, but isn't that your issue with the fudge as well?
That's also my issue with the fudge.
Okay. Right.
So
but they are like they have the sour coating. I mean, that's oof. I love that stuff. Yeah.
They're really good. There's smokables, there's smalls, there's pre-rolls, there's lotion, there's salve, which I've started to use with Anarcha, because of it's summer and that means my eczema is back. And the Sunset Lake has great business practices. As you know, $15 minimum wage. They're mostly employee owned. They have great farming practices, pesticide free, fully organic. They're tested by third-party testers. On top of which, they practice integrated pest management and regenerative farming, and they're movement partners. They've been pushing people to support the St. Vincent nurses in Worcester, amongst other things. They engage in their community. Just an all-around great company. Left is Best gets you 20% off at Sunset Lake CBD. Left is Best. SunsetLakeCBD.com. We will, of course, put the link in our podcast and our YouTube subscription. Check it out, folks. You will not be disappointed. And Brendan today has a read. He is. We are also sponsored by Geology, which makes a line of skincare products. Brendan, what's the word?
Yeah, well, they were so happy with my ad read yesterday. They said, would you please do another? And I said, absolutely. For this product, I'll do anything. So it's a simple skincare routine formulated for daily use. And it's a personalized skincare routine too, which is really important because, as someone who's dealt with acne in the past, I'm very worried about like a one size fits all sort of, skincare routine. So I took a very quick diagnostic test and I was handed the Vital Morning Face Cream, the Repairing Night Cream, and a retinol for like wrinkles and like having very nice skin. And I was a bit wary of like these sorts of things because I need like a very light moisturizer because I tend to clog easily. But I've integrated the Geology stuff into my daily routine and it's worked like a dream. My skin is clearer and feels very like revitalized. And finding a good moisturizer is a hard thing to do, especially for guys, I think. So I definitely recommend it. And when you sign up now, what's that?
Did you pass the test?
I did pass the test. Yeah, they flying colors. As a matter of fact, they make you proud. But you start with a trial set and it's 30 days worth of stuff. You get all 4 products: the Everyday Face Wash, the Vital Morning Face Cream, Repairing Night Cream, Nourishing Eye Cream. And once you're done, you can continue with a 90-day supply, or you can go a la carte and pick what you like. I think moving forward, I'll probably stick with the the nighttime repair cream, and the retinol, because I feel like I've gotten the best results out of that. And it's just been really great. And, as we emerge out of our, mask wearing phase, you got your mask knee, you got, you want to look good heading out and being social again, I would highly recommend starting off with this sort of skincare routine. So you can head to geology.com and take the free skincare quiz and save up to 40% off on the first 30-day trial. And you can click our specific link in the podcast description or the YouTube and go to geology.com. Check it out.
All right, folks, check it out. Geology.com. Link is in the podcast description and the YouTube description. Again, you can support the show by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Want to welcome David Sirota back to the program. Also, before we do, I also want to remind you, this Monday in Charleston, West Virginia, Moral Monday is doing a rally there, hopefully to push Joe Manchin. We'll put the details in the podcast description and the YouTube description. In the meantime, want to welcome back to the program David Sirota. David, what is your specific title at the Daily Poster? I mean, I know you're a founder,
editor, troublemaker, problem creator.
At the Daily Poster.
Yes,
amongst your
amongst your colleagues. Wow.
Oh yeah.
Emma,
stress inducer.
There you go. Yes. Well, I mean, that's the job. Emma's here. Emma
Hi,
Bigland
David.
as well.
Hey, Emma.
So a tough week for folks who had any type of aspirations for the Biden administration. It sort of feels like it started with Joe Manchin reiterating in some ways, but maybe in clearer tones. I don't know. He had an op-ed in the West Virginia paper saying that he wasn't going to support the For the People Act, which he had stated before, and he was not going to, it seems like under any circumstance, vote to weaken or remove the filibuster. And he also sort of laid out this concept of bipartisanship, that a bill is bipartisan only if Republicans vote for it, which on one level I can understand, but the other is like, well, what if they helped create it and gave a list of demands and every one of those demands was met, and it set up a commission where every one of the Republicans on the commission would have the exact same powers as the Democrats? That to me also sounds like a bipartisan piece of legislation, but the Republicans didn't vote for that. What's your take on the whole Manchin thing?
Well, I mean, first of all, I do think the way we use the term bipartisan is distorted. I mean, a bill that has 80% support, including significant support among Republicans, rank and file Republican voters and independent voters, that's a different version of bipartisan. So the way we define, or the way the term bipartisan is used in politics, is bipartisan is what a tiny handful of people in Washington who have R's and D's behind their name can come together on. It's not necessarily a definition of what's actually bipartisan in the United States of America as a whole. And that's a real problem. I mean, that's a long-term problem. I think with Manchin, look, I think that we should not underestimate the power of narcissistic spotlight syndrome. Okay. And narcissistic spotlight syndrome is, I don't have any ideology at all other than that I want to be at the center of the circus. And we've seen this before. I mean, politics tends to self-select for people like that. But John McCain had that. I would argue, had that syndrome. I mean, he was all over the map on issues, and you couldn't really put any ideological thread together to connect a lot of his positions, except for the fact that him being so unpredictable and all over the place kept him in the center of the spotlight. And the problem with dealing with somebody like that is the media, grassroots interest groups, advocates are putting forward arguments on their merits, like, how can Joe Manchin say he's for democracy if he's supporting a filibuster to kill the For the People Act? That's a fair question on the merits. But what if the answer is just his behavior doing that keeps him at the center of attention, keeps him the circus circling around him, and that's the reason why he's doing it. Now, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze Joe Manchin here, but I think we have to sort of appreciate the fact that his behavior may not be predicated on the merits of policy arguments, on the merits of even traditional political calculation, other than the fact that he's a human being. Lots of human beings get dopamine shots in their brain when they feel like they're the center of attention, right. and that's what we may actually be dealing with. And what's crazy is that's what American democracy may now be hinging on, which is kind of insane to think about.
I mean, we went through this with Joe Lieberman, the back, certainly during the ACA, when he just completely did a 180 on his position with the Medicare buy-in and lowered Medicare age.
Yep.
What about and I think I think you're absolutely right that the calculus that is being applied to his decision may be just too narrow in terms of like not contemplating other things. There also seems to me another possibility, and none of these are mutually exclusive, that you've got a tremendous amount of Coke money that by Coke industry money in West Virginia. We know that there's other reluctant, let's say filibuster, anti-filibuster reform Democratic senators who are sort of using Joe Manchin as a cover a little bit. Because one of the theories is like, why doesn't Joe Biden go down there and say to Joe Manchin, whatever you want, which I imagine he's done, right? Like, he must have gone to Joe Manchin and said, the Joe Manchin Civic Center, the Joe Manchin, Route 37, whatever it is. Like, you want it in the infrastructure bill? It's there. And the problem is that we don't know if those other senators who are reluctant about getting rid of the filibuster as well, because they don't want to take certain votes and they don't want to be exposed for being against certain things. They don't want to be put between a rock and a hard place with their corporate donors. If they're not turning around and saying to Joe Manchin the same thing, like, we can get you that too.
That's a great point. I mean, like that's the Joe Manchin human shield theory, that Joe Manchin is basically the willing human shield of 5, 10, 15 Democratic senators who actually support what Joe Manchin is doing, but are happy to have him take the heat for that, happy to have him be their blast shield, so that they can kind of pretend that they're for a thing that they're not actually for, and Joe Manchin takes all the heat. I mean, I think there may be some legitimacy to that theory as well, because here's the thing: you haven't really heard that many senators really speak out publicly at all in explicit terms about Manchin's behavior. Now, some of that's like Senate tradition, and everyone's, my good friend here and my colleague there. But I also think, like, if you're legitimately for the things that need to be done and the filibuster is blocking those things, and you're in the Senate, and you're sitting there. Now, granted, I think I've narrowed down the Democratic caucus there by a significant amount, because I don't think a lot of politicians, frankly, if I'm going to be cynical, are really first and foremost there to do things. I think they're there because they enjoy the spotlight. I think they're there because it's a high-profile job, high-status job. But if you're one of those senators who actually is there to actually do something, and Joe Manchin is essentially singularly or almost singularly stopping that from happening, you've got to be like incredibly frustrated. Like, you've got to be really, really frustrated. And the fact that there hasn't been a lot of outspoken pressure from his own colleagues, it does kind of give me pause and make me wonder, like, how many of those folks are just sort of like, actually, I don't really mind what Joe Manchin's doing. Like, I don't really mind it.
Yeah, the thing that grosses me out most about this, and I know this is a really galaxy brain cynical take, I guess, is that Democrats are really happy to fundraise off of issues like gun control or police brutality and hit at the emotional just core of those issues with the professional managerial class or whatever the case may be, the upper middle class to middle class donor base that they're targeting, and yet not change the necessary rules to get anything done in that area. And so I think the tough vote point that Sam brings up is really key as well, but also because not acting on non-budgetary issues for them that are, emotional points for Democratic voters, there's not really any consequences to it because they're financially incentivized every time to just, I guess, keep fundraising off of it.
And I want to add one other dynamic here. Many years ago in 2000, I think it was 2006, I interviewed Barack Obama. I spent a day with him. And we were talking about healthcare. And he made an argument about healthcare reform. And his argument was basically, I want to reform the system. I'm not a revolutionary, I'm a reformer. And I bring that up because what it said to me at the time is that this was a Democratic leader speaking about really a broader democratic culture that is conflict averse and is afraid of structurally changing the power dynamic in a way that could be considered unprecedented, right? The Democratic Party is a conflict-averse party that is not comfortable with the idea of making structural changes that would be portrayed as first ever historic, sort of a new paradigm. And I think we are now living in the ultimate culmination of that, where you have a Democratic Party that is not willing to structurally change, for instance, the filibuster rules to structurally then change the election system. And I think it goes to this deep innate fear of actual change, that as much as the Democratic Party campaigns on hope and change, it is a party that is incredibly afraid of making change. Now, the cynical take would be they're not afraid of making change. They actually don't want to make change. I think it's a mix of both.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think there's a similar mix in terms of the absence of Manchin's fellow senators speaking out, because I think part of it could be just like, well, we don't know. If we speak out at this point, are we further, if it is a certain amount of narcissism, is this the way he gets his back stiffened up and he's like, well, I'm definitely not going to do it now. Although I found it interesting that this week AOC sort of unloaded on him as if she gets the writing on the wall, this fight is over. And now it's time to sort of, hold those who have been responsible for it to account. The idea that you bring up that we have a significant portion of the Democratic caucus in the Senate who have not come out and been explicit about the filibuster is also problematic, I think, on some level, because they.
Well, and also it's worth adding that they keep leaking out every now and again. You're going to see one of these senators actually admit that they don't want to get rid of the filibuster. I think it was yesterday. Dianne Feinstein was like, P.S. I'm not really for getting rid of the. Now I can't remember if she was already on record about that. But my point is,
she can't remember. No one can. Right.
I'm not being facetious here, and I am very sensitive to this issue. Believe me, very sensitive to it. But there is a real problem with Dianne Feinstein. She did come out months ago for filibuster reform. She has completely forgotten about it. And frankly, at least we see in Arizona, the Democratic Party in Arizona, the Democratic, House caucus and Senate caucus, Arizona Democrats have made it very publicly clear that they want Kristen Sinema to support filibuster reform. I don't know where the California Democrats are. They need to.
That's a fair point. And by the way, just on that point with Sinema, if you really want to pin something to Joe Biden, right? Let's say you take at its word the argument that Joe Biden can't really exert any pressure on Joe Manchin because it's a state that Joe Biden lost, and that it's impossible to pressure a senator as president from a state that you lost, which P.S. is complete bullshit when you consider, Nate Silver brought that up on Twitter and I tweeted back at him, true story, that Lyndon Johnson in 1964 got crushed in Louisiana and soon thereafter managed to flip the vote of Russell Long in one of two key votes on Medicare. Russell Long was a big opponent of Medicare, and Johnson managed to flip him. So the whole, but let's just say you take that argument. Okay, Biden can't pressure, has no leverage over Manchin. Well, because of West Virginia. Well, he by that same logic, he should have some serious leverage over Kyrsten Sinema because of Arizona. He won Arizona. Arizona is a much more a Democratic swing state. She probably may have a primary challenge. She could have a primary challenge. So there's a lot of ways to, and as you mentioned, her party, members of her party in that state are pushing her. So my question, even before Manchin and the filibuster, is where is the White House pressure? Where is the leverage being used? Because they have leverage on Kyrsten Sinema. Like where is that?
She's like a different brand of narcissist, right? If we're talking about the narcissism of Joe Manchin, hers is specific in its weirdness of like girl boss. It's almost creepier to me not to do a pejorative, but I digress. Keep going.
Well, I mean, I guess, what is interesting on this point is that, they started, the administration started, I don't know if you remember this, they deployed Kamala Harris to go to do local media in West Virginia and in Arizona in the run up to the vote on the stimulus bill. Supposedly Manchin was upset by it. And there was a different dynamic at that time because you had Jim Justice, who was the Republican governor of West Virginia, former Democrat, et cetera, coming out saying like, we want our $2,000 checks. And I would imagine that put a little pressure on Joe Manchin. But he came out and said, like, I didn't appreciate her coming down here and that type of thing. But it certainly got Sinema in line. And we don't see that yet. And so let's just turn to what we do see. Joe Biden negotiates with Capetto for, 4 weeks, which was probably like 3.5 weeks too long. And then immediately pivots to this gang of 10. And I want to be clear, it's a gang of 5 Republicans and a gang of 5 Democrats. And they need 10 Republicans to vote for this. Right. Now, I guess it's conceivable there's another 5 Republicans out there who are just like, well, I'm going to let these guys, negotiate on my behalf. But that's not happening. Like what is this? Is Joe Biden still on the, I'm going to show Joe Manchin, illustrate to Joe Manchin that it's impossible to come to a deal situation? Because the January 6th commission, if that didn't prove it to Joe Manchin, or wasn't substantial enough to him use as a fig leaf for the narrative he creates in West Virginia, which is probably more the case, this isn't going to do it.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think this goes back to Joe Biden. I think being fundamentally, having spent 40 years in the Senate and prioritizing, things are good if you have gangs of 5 or gangs of 10, or, things are defined as good if you can convince Republicans to join with Democrats. And the problem with that viewpoint is that, does anybody remember how the greatest things in American history passed? Does anybody remember those roll call votes? Like, the answer is no. The answer is that what we remember are changes to the law that materially improve people's lives. So the real problem here, or one real problem here, is this holding up of, as long as a bill has bipartisan support, it must be good. As long as the roll call vote is like 75-25, this must be good. And of course, if you roll back history, there are a lot of things that passed with those vote counts that are really bad. Wall Street deregulation, the Iraq War. I could go through the list here, but the things that tend to pass the US Senate with huge majorities are the things that either do nothing, or at least from historical precedent, have been bad. So the question that I don't really understand, unless you go to the cynical idea that maybe Biden really doesn't want these things to happen, but if you discount that, then what you're looking at is kind of a religion of bipartisanship that is unmoored from what it should and is actually valued in society.
I for one, I am skeptical that Biden doesn't want this stuff to pass because it just makes him look weak to have presented
I agree.
it in the first
I
place.
agree.
And Biden.
Although there's a middle ground, Sam. There's a middle ground. I want something to pass so badly that I'm willing to sell it out complete or gut it and only get crumbs. Like
Right.
That's another problem. Like how much am I willing to cut out of this bill
because I'm
make
still
it happen?
sympathetic to the religious orthodoxy of
Yes.
bipartisanship,
Yes.
which is the
Yes.
tradition he comes from. Right.
Although there's a power dynamic there too, right?
Yeah.
The power dynamic is the other part of this is I can gut a bill if I don't have to deal with demands on the left, meaning forging a compromise is, okay, I've got the right here saying they don't want this and I got to do this for this bill. And I don't have to care about the left because the left will be with me anyway. One thing that was interesting that happened this week, and I want to be clear, I don't fully believe this is going to happen because I've been alive long enough to never have seen it happen. But when you have people like Jeff Merkley and Ed Markey go out there and say, no climate, no deal, which we did not see vis-a-vis the minimum wage on the stimulus bill, a sort of line in the sand. But if they're starting to draw a line in the sand on climate and an asterisk, they haven't been specific about what no climate actually means. But the point is if there is starting to be a block of Democratic senators who are saying we are not going to vote for a bill unless it has X, Y, and Z, then it changes the negotiating calculation for the White House. The White House can't just say, oh, listen, I'm going to cut this bill down to whatever the Republicans want and take for granted that I've got the support on the left. They actually have to balance those things, which would be a good dynamic.
All right, let me just be clear on what, for folks who aren't aware, that we now have Democratic senators who are basically saying, like, we will sink this infrastructure bill.
Yes.
If it does not include any type of, and again, proof is like we need the devil's in the details type of situation, but we will sink it if it does not include the materials that we want or the spending that we want to fight climate change. Right. And part of that is, and so let me just back up for 1 second, because I think like Biden made it clear that he wouldn't go with Capetto all the way down. He wouldn't go to like only $300 billion of new spending. He's held the line, granted, at about less than half of what he had originally rolled out in the first tranche of infrastructure bill, right? It started 2.3 trillion. The last, he was down to like 1 trillion with like 800 billion new spending. And so he doesn't want it to be just an empty shell in that regard. But to your point about non-bipartisan bills that at least the Biden administration should think is a success, the ACA, what he said was a big BFD at the time, did not get any Republican votes. So he knows this. And that's the thing that just seems there. When Merkley and Markey come out and say this, that means that they're afraid that somehow that Gang of 10 bill will end up become the legislation, and the Biden people are going to go, and then we'll get the rest in reconciliation. But Markey and Merkley know when we get to reconciliation, we're still going to have a problem from Joe Manchin. So it's got to be, for different people, the sugar and the medicine are different parts of the bill, right?
Exactly. And we
got to do it together or it doesn't happen.
And the key is to mobilize the force of the White House, right? That is the key, is to actually mobilize Joe Biden and the entire executive branch behind finding a compromise that has to take into account climate and what progressives want. I tried to make that argument on the stimulus bill, that if there was no line in the sand on the $15 minimum wage, if there was no, we're not going to vote for this, we're going to withhold our votes unless it includes this, then you're basically not forcing Joe Biden to engage with all of those tools that the White House has to actually engage, tools that we've seen people like Lyndon Johnson use, right? I know there's this whole idea, there's this whole Green Lantern theory out there, right? It's a theory that is designed to scoff at those who say that the president has all the power in the world to move legislators in his own party. I agree that Joe Biden ultimately doesn't have complete singular power to move Democratic lawmakers in Congress, but I believe he's got significant power. And the way to force him to use that power is for there to be a block of votes on the left saying, you must meet these demands or you cannot count on our votes.
And just to put a finer point on the point you're making here, one illustration of this is that the Biden administration clearly has its priorities and its agenda, and you can see this in the context of things they don't want to deal with, right? Like they didn't want to deal with the Israel-Palestine situation, and they were caught very flat-footed, and they during this this last attack on Gaza, and they just don't want to expend any resources on it. That is basically what when we are pressuring the White House, that is what we're basically saying. We want you to put your energies. It's not a question of like, we want you to come up with magic things. It is like, we want you to put all of your eggs in this basket or more of your eggs in this basket. And the way that you do that is to say, like, you're going to have no basket if you don't put all your eggs there. We're going to withhold the basket and you're not going to be able to carry any eggs. Maybe I'm getting a little caught up in that, but the point is, it's just like okay. So with all this said, it appears like there's not going to be any type of voting bill that is going to get passed unless, Joe Manchin can be convinced to reform the filibuster only to pass the John Lewis bill. But that one has its problems too, in that it can't be passed for months because of requirements for public hearings and whatnot. And it's not retroactive. So the worst of offenses that these states could perpetrate on voters essentially will have been completed, and then will have been grandfathered in to this new Voting Rights Act. And just to be clear, the original Voting Rights Act was specifically about what our grandfathers had done and our fathers, and maybe probably our brothers and our sons, in terms of keeping of disenfranchising people. The idea of grandfathering in already disenfranchising laws is just absurd to me.
It is, and I think what we've seen when it comes to democracy is the Democratic Party is not behaving with the urgency that the situation requires. I mean, I don't want to be like dark and super dystopian here, but you have seen state after state after state controlled by Republicans aggressively trying to and succeeding in making it harder to vote. It's not an overstatement. It's not hyperbolic to say that there is an assault happening on democracy, and the Democratic Party is effectively unilaterally disarming in Washington. The obvious crazy hypocrisy of Joe Manchin about saying, I want to respect the rules, is you have a situation where Republicans are changing the rules in the state level, and the Democrats aren't using power in Washington to protect the right to vote. And what's really crazy, what's really disturbing about it is that we look back on history when it comes to desegregation, when it comes to voting rights, as the history of that is the heroic history, is the federal government marching into states to protect the right to vote, to protect equality, right? The famous Norman Rockwell photo of the little girl going into the school, the first African-American girl to go into the white school. This is considered, we put that on a pedestal, and rightly so. And the story behind that is that the federal government had to intervene. And what we are now seeing is the opposite, that the Republicans are waging that war in the states, and the federal government is essentially gridlocked by a filibuster, unwilling, unable, and refusing to use that same power. So it's really super disturbing. And the crazy thing to me is like, why is this party not acting with urgency, especially because it's in the party's short-term political self-interest on top of everything. Not only is it like moral and right and like, this moment in history, but it's like, this is to protect you as well.
Well, doesn't seem to be a democratic, a unified democratic sort of like assessment of what is in the party's interest, right? Like, Joe Manchin's thinking about what's in Joe Manchin's interest. Mark Warner is thinking about what's in Mark Warner's interest.
Right. But here's the thing, Sam. West Virginia is literally passing laws to limit voting rights. Like, I don't think that's in Joe Manchin's, even his interest. Like, making sure lots of people vote is essentially in the Democratic Party's interest. If you believe that the Republicans are in the population at large are a minority party, or at least a party that represents a minority of views, not the majoritarian viewpoint. So the fact that they're not willing to save themselves is what I'm saying.
I mean, there's rumblings. Maybe Manchin doesn't want to be in the Senate for that much longer. Could tee him up for some sort of, oh, I'm a renegade running for governor in West Virginia. I don't really know, but could be something like that.
Sure. Look, brandishing, I am not your typical Democrat. If you're representing a Republican state, I sort of get that branding, but ultimately, if you really ask yourself, is there really a mass constituency? Really be honest with yourself. Is there really a mass constituency of people being I am a filibuster voter? That's what I go to the polls in elections. I vote for people who that is not a real thing. That's not a real mass constituency. So the oddest part of this to me, other than as we mentioned at the top, if you explain it by the narcissistic spotlight syndrome, but if you set that aside, the thing I don't really understand is it's not like Joe Manchin is going back to West Virginia and a lot of people, rank and file voters, are hey, my main thing with you is I'm supporting you because you're supporting the filibuster. That's not a real thing, no. Right? So he's picking a fight on a kind of esoteric Washington rules that nobody in the real world pays attention to. That's what he's digging in on, as opposed to digging in on sort of specifics.
I do think, though, I think it really just comes down to, in addition to, again, it's an all of the above type of situation in terms of his motivation. But I think a big part of it is he doesn't want to vote for certain things. He doesn't want to vote against certain things because he has, and who knows if he's correct or not. But, there's certain things he didn't want to vote for. And he doesn't want necessarily his, let's say, Democratic voters. He needs those Democrats. 85% of Democrats he gets in West Virginia. You get something like 17% of Republicans, but those numbers are, add up to a majority because he's, it's more Republicans in that state. He doesn't want to piss off either constituency. And the best way you can do that is by not having to take a position on these things or not having to take a vote. And the filibuster allows you not to take a vote.
That's a really good point. That ultimately, if you are a scared politician and you're trying to appease everybody, then essentially doing nothing is arguably, I guess, in theory, like a somewhat safe position, just being, but then the flip side argument is that you're in no man's land. Nobody likes you, right?
Well, but nobody hates you. And sometimes for these politicians that if I've got the incumbency and I've got the Koch network with the money, I just need somebody not to, be motivated to vote against me as much as I need them to be motivated for me. I don't know if that calculation is, effective in every situation or any situations, but it's certainly one that I think a lot of politicians, embrace. And so, so let me ask you this. So what then becomes what do we do? It's very hard to sort of assess. And by we, I mean, not Emma and I and you, but I mean, exclusively, but
right.
As to where we apply pressure, where, is it along the lines of supporting people like Merkley and Markey who say, we're not going to vote for this bill? And it's, sometimes it's a tough situation. I wouldn't have wanted, I don't know if I would want to sink the COVID stimulus. I mean, that.
Well, look, but I don't believe that I don't believe that would have happened. And now, granted, look, everybody's playing a game of prognostication. You can't predict the future. But I would say this: I would say that if there was a crew of Democratic lawmakers who had said on the stimulus, you cannot count on our vote unless there's a $15 minimum wage in here, you would have at least seen a much more mobilized White House to get it put in there. Would it have succeeded? I'm not sure. Would the bill never have been passed? Would the bill potentially have come up, been voted down, and then 3 days later come back up and passed? Probably. The whole idea that there's like this one chance to pass something, and if it gets voted down, it's like gone forever. That's just not the way Congress works. I mean, I'll give you an example. Like the TARP bill, the bank bailout in the middle of the financial crisis came up the first time, it got voted down, it came back a week later, and they passed it because it was an emergency. No matter where you are on whether you think that was a good bill or a bad bill, the idea that like it was one and done is like not true. So the best I can come up with is progressive pressure on, especially, by the way, members of the House, because it's a narrowly divided House as well. Let's not forget about the House. Progressive pressure on House members or on one or two senators to say, you need to withhold your vote on something that the Biden administration wants in order to mobilize the Biden administration to actually put the screws on the other side of the party, on the Manchin side of the party. That, to me, is the best chance that we have here, because I think certainly pressuring Manchin himself, embarrassing him, shaming him, all that, and Sinema too, all that is important as well. But I think ultimately, if you had a block of 10 House members who said, and a couple senators who said, if specific X, Y, and Z on climate are not in this infrastructure bill, you will not get our votes for this bill. That is the best chance to get the Biden administration to do everything it can to put X, Y, and Z in that bill. That is the dynamic we're dealing with.
Lastly, I want to get your take on what's going on with Ilhan Omar. The irony of this, maybe it's not irony, or just maybe it's a coincidence. But the first sort of series of attacks on Ilhan Omar came in 2018, or really, I guess it was 2019, when the Democrats had just taken the House. She had said something that was about the Israel lobby that was very consistent with what Thomas Friedman, not a Muslim woman, said similarly about the Israel lobby. And the House leadership, as well as some of the more conservative members of the Democratic caucus in the House, they went on a full-on assault on Ilhan Omar and completely stepped all over their passage of HR 1, which we are, which is again, like it's almost, I mean, the parallels are just sort of stunning. And it's quite clear that, like, if there was a problem with what she had said, or they wanted her to clarify what she said because they saw it as some type of political liability, they could have reached out to her. This is not a new member. She's, she won her reelection. This is not but they didn't want to do that. They wanted to launch an attack because she said the words United States, Taliban, and Israel and Hamas in the same sentence, right, regarding, people who, need to subject themselves to the jurisdiction of the ICC. What do you make of this? Is this like, people worried about slippage in the Democratic caucus for support for Israel?
I think there's some of that. I also think that my one takeaway is that a party that's not willing to put real pressure on Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema is also a party that is willing to try to vilify one of its own members. So it spotlights the hypocrisy in the whole, blue team unity argument. Like blue team unity that you always, we can't, another Democrat shouldn't attack another Democrat and all. Like that's selectively applied. Like this is clearly a party that is willing to go after certain members of its own party, based on political calculations. So it betrays the whole idea of a so-called unified party. When you hear folks in Washington talk about party unity, what they're talking about is the left must show fealty to the center right of the party, but the center right can continue kicking the left in the face. And the last thing I'll say about the Ilhan Omar things in specific, I mean, clearly the situation is spring-loaded now to attack her. Like anything that she says, even in this space at all, there is now it's like a break the glass box. We know, there's like a set plan. It doesn't even matter what she's saying. So the conversation, like it's entirely like contrived. It's not even real. It's like a contrived thing. And it goes to your point, which is that ultimately what's behind that is, an effort to preserve the status quo when it comes to U.S. policy in the Middle East. I mean, that's what it is. And look, frankly, some of that's just, local constituency politics among some of these members of Congress who represent areas in which, just simply lockstep support, never questioning U.S. policy towards Israel is considered good local politics. And, I'm frankly happy to see more of a vibrant discussion in the Democratic Party about what an actual, real, fair, and productive policy in the Middle East looks like. To be honest, it's like the first time in my life I can remember where at least that discussion is happening. And what you see is the people attacking Ilhan Omar, really, they don't want to have even a legitimate discussion. So they're trying to essentially polarize the situation to prevent any like nuanced, honest discussion about how to like reform the basic policy.
And part of that polarization is using the fact that bigotry is leveled against her on a regular basis for their own purposes. And that's kind of what, Nancy Pelosi can kneel and can take cloth all she wants, but there is a real undercurrent of racism and Islamophobia that she and Democratic leadership and the members of Congress who initially brought this up, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and others, they're using that for their own ends, which I find fairly gross.
Absolutely. And honestly, like the conflation of criticism of U.S. policy towards Israel, the conflation of that as anti-Semitism is super problematic. And I should add, look, I think, to be honest, anti-Semitism is a real thing. I mean, that's a real thing in this society, in this world. And I think that when honest critics of U.S. policy who are making earnest and good fact-based arguments about why U.S. Israel policy should change, are vilified dishonestly as anti-Semites, it actually, I believe, as somebody who is Jewish, I believe that undermines the actual campaign and cause of stopping real anti-Semitism in the world. Like it does not help the cause of stopping anti-Semitism to vilify honest critics of a U.S. policy towards Israel that is clearly unfair and not working.
Yeah, I agree. All right, listen, we just have a minute left here. You guys at the Daily Poster have a feature that I love. It also happens to be called "Do You Love to See It?" So give me in your mind this week, what did we love to see? And I should say also, let me just add, folks should subscribe to the Daily Poster. I do, and it is the reporting that you guys do there is really for just in general. But particularly for an independent outfit, is really, really impressive.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So what do I love to see this week? I mean, one, we talked about the drawing a line in the, at least rhetoric of drawing a line in the sand. Like we haven't seen that in a long time. You saw Maine begin to divest from fossil fuels, which is, I believe it's the first state whose pension fund is going to start pulling money out of fossil fuels. Doesn't seem like, I mean, it seems like kind of a technical issue. That's a huge issue. The amount of pension money that is essentially propping up the fossil fuel industry is huge. And then this didn't happen. This happened at the end of last week. The shareholder situation at Exxon, where shareholders rose up and changed members of Exxon's board. I mean, that never, ever happens. So shareholders having more and more success in trying to force companies to change, that to me, I mean, we pay so much attention to Congress and Washington and whatever, but like, if you can actually change a company like Exxon, and this is the first step. It's not like everything's changed, but if you can actually move a company as big and powerful as Exxon even a little bit, that has like serious global implications. So those are my three.
David Sirota, Daily Poster, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. It's great to see both of you.
Thanks, David.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back and then wrap things up. All right, folks, if you're watching us on Peacock, that is our week. Emma and I will be back on Monday with more.
As Trump would say, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Peacock.
We will see you on Monday. Thanks for joining us. And for those of you sticking around, Andrew Callaghan is going to be joining us. Right, Brendan?
Yeah, he's in the waiting room.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But
we were supposed to have him last week, and I guess I know what the first question is going to be when he comes on. He is the guy who started All Gas No Brakes. He's now got a project called Channel 5. Let's bring him on. Andrew Callaghan. Here he comes. Emma's got to take her constitutional. She'll be back. She's gonna go eat her almonds. Here he comes. Connecting slowly.
Now.
All right, this is good stuff. What? Okay. Why am I getting no sound? Oh. Wow.
See him there?
He's really taking his time.
He might be watching on YouTube, maybe. There he is.
Oh, there we go.
What's up?
Oh. Andrew Callaghan, welcome to the program. Are you on a
Thanks for having me on.
Dial-up internet or what? What's going on with that?
Why? Is my service bad? I'm at the Super 8 in Arizona.
Okay, you're at the Super 8 in Arizona. You got the you went with the low end package on the internet. Andrew,
I certainly did.
Welcome to the program. Sorry, I got to start with this question. What happened last week?
At the QAnon Patriot Roundup?
No, we had you booked, and apparently you were we saw tweets that you were out, maybe partying on the West Coast, and you slept through the interview.
You saw a tweet that I was partying?
we were tracking you.
I think, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I travel every day, and I guess I got the whole Pacific time, PST, EST mixed up. I didn't know you guys lived on the East Coast. Yeah. So I thought 1 p.m. I woke up at 12:30 and I was like, I'm doing a great job for myself. I looked at the email and I was like, God damn it. So thanks for giving me a second chance.
No, well, thank you for coming on. So explain to people what, and Emma will be back in just a moment, but explain to people what you do. I mean, it is really the idea of it on some level. I've seen other people do it. Emma did it to a certain extent, but it's the way that you do it, I think, that really has made people enjoy watching you so much. In fact, you know what? Let's do this. Why don't you tell us, and then Brendan will play a clip.
I travel around the country, either in an RV or in a van with my two best friends, and get into weird shit and interview different kinds of people, and then put my own kind of stylized editing thing on it. Yeah, I think so. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, let's watch the clip and see if it is accurate.
They assassinated Kobe Bryant. How many people know that? They assassinated Kobe Bryant. They tried to kill Tiger Woods in that car accident recently.
Why?
The Kobe Bryant deal is that he had dirt on the Clintons. I love black people. I love everybody. We're all God's children.
Isn't this a White Lives Matter rally?
Well, I'll tell you what, this whole thing with the virus, with BLM, with Antifa, that was to hurt President Trump. And the reason that President Trump wasn't back by January 20th, the reason he hasn't been back yet is because he didn't want to have civil war. I think you know where I was on January 6th.
Where were you?
I think you know where I was on January 6th. Trump is still in control of our country.
Where'd you get those shoes from? Those are pretty fresh.
Those are just being a champion for the Lord. That's it.
Amen. It's good for you. See, there's nothing anti-white supremacist about that. That's not a white supremacist message.
Sometimes the truth hurts.
What's the most painful piece of truth that's hurt you?
Guy stealing my home. He falsified a trustee's deed to himself with 7 false representations on it and stole my home. His name's Bill Joyner. He lives in Shady Canyon. He destroyed my family, destroyed my 25-year business, separated and devastated my family. So that answers your question.
This dude sounds like he sucks.
I don't think he's a good guy. In my opinion, he's a bad guy and he's hurt a lot of people. But then again, look what the Democrats are doing to others. The deep state is trying to control the people. They control the banking. They control the countries. They control the Vatican. And I care about our country. I want people to know what's going on.
What's going on is a White Lives Matter rally.
Is that what's going on? Yeah. Oh, okay. I had no idea what was going on. I heard that there was a BLM thing going on, and with that usually comes Antifa. I'm kind of anti-Antifa.
These are the, quote, White Lives Do Matter flyers that Huntington Beach police have said they received a report about from at least one neighborhood.
White Lives Matter rally and counter-protest today in Huntington Beach.
Yeah, it's okay to be white, right? Yeah, I'm not here to be violent or anything. I'm just here for, just say everybody's.
All right.
Everything
honestly,
matters.
So what brought you?
I could watch this for a very extended period of time. But that is, I think that's a pretty good representation. Andrew, Emma is here.
Hey, Andrew, how are you?
Great. Thank you, Emma. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
So, all right. So, let's just let's start from the sort of very superficial to getting forward in what's up with the suit? Why do you wear are you wearing the suit so that you show like respect to the people that you're interviewing? Is that what's going on there?
Yeah, it's all about respect and also just like professionalism. I mean, like at every event, there's like 50 journalists, you know what I mean? But if you have the suit, especially a giant brown suit, it differentiates you. It makes you look like you're supposed to be there and that people need to talk to you.
Interesting. And does that work?
Yeah, it actually really does work. I mean, like, I think I'm going to cut my hair and give myself more of like a newsman haircut because I'm looking a little bit too like bohemian nowadays. Some people think that I'm like trolling. But.
Well, I mean, do you think people are going to be more hostile to you in those events if you look like you're actually from like the mainstream press or not? I'm curious. I mean, Emma's done this. I've done a little bit, just, once or twice back in the day of going to like a 9/12 rally that Glenn Beck had. And Emma's gone to a bunch of Trump rallies and stuff like this. I wonder, like, how much hostility do you get, let's put it that way, from these people at any point, or is it not?
Well, like I said, it's all about optics. You know what I mean? So it's all about adjusting little details about your presentation if you want to talk to both sides at a protest like that. For example, like in that video, if you see, whenever I talk to people who are on the Trump side, I put on an American flag gaiter. And then when I'm talking to people who are part of the counter protest, I put on like a black mask or a bandana or like a regular surgical mask. It's like those small nods is enough for people to be like, okay, this is the right press. This is the right media. So anytime I'm covering like a Trump event or something like that, I'm always going with little stuff like a USA gaiter or a more patriotic Statue of Liberty tie. I have one tie with the Constitution on it. It's all about how people feel.
I found that when I went to Trump rallies, just being white in general was quite helpful in getting people to talk to you.
Yeah, there's that too.
Right.
But then again, like I won't lie to people. Like I wouldn't wear like a MAGA hat to a rally. That's just like over the line. Like if I was at a Trump rally and somebody was like, "Hey, are you a Trump supporter?" I'd be like, "Nah, not really."
All right. So, how representative, let's say, was that guy of the? I mean, obviously, look, you're picking the guys who are you're editing the guys who are, sort of the most sort of flamboyant and maybe, some people would say crazy. How representative is that guy of those type of events?
I mean, that event specifically, and I talked to an LA Weekly journalist about this, and she said that there actually was no organizer for that event. There was no White Lives Matter organization or organizer. There was no loyal white knight party that was actually drawing people to come to that event. I don't know who organized it, but it wasn't real. A lot of people think it was a honeypot to identify white nationalists after January 6th. The counter protest was scheduled by a local Black Lives Matter chapter. So the counter protest had organization and central leadership. The actual event was just social media marketing to try to get white nationalists and Trump supporters to show up on time at that day. No actual leadership showed up. That guy that I interviewed didn't even see that the event was called White Lives Matter. He just drove by and saw Black Lives Matter protesters and was like, fuck this, and just pulled over, took his flags out of the trunk and just started going for it. But yeah, I mean, he's representative of a lot of people down there. I mean, he obviously, look at what he said. I mean, if that is true that someone stole his home and destroyed his family, it's obvious that he projected that traumatic experience onto the Democrats. Maybe Bill Joyner from Shady Canyon, who falsified the trustee's deed, was a Democrat. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, pretty representative.
I wonder how much, I mean, you know, the interesting thing is too, they've done studies that like there's the foreclosure rate of of people who've been arrested at, you know, at the Capitol was pretty high relative to your average population. I wonder how much, if you have a sense of when you talk to these people at these various events, because we should say you've been to, I don't know, how many of these type of events have you been to?
20 to 30.
Yeah, I mean, do you hear stories like that? Like, you know, I mean, I don't know if you'll hear a lot of stuff about like both Tiger Woods and Kobe Bryant were taken out by the Democrats because Kobe was going to do a lot of, you know, in-depth reporting on what the Democrats are up to, that type of thing. But how much do you hear of like complaints about politics and then there's sort of like a subtext of my life sucks because of X, Y, Z?
I mean, in the conspiracy circuit, it's almost every person you talk to. If you dig deep enough, there's some sort of like foundational trauma that sent them down the rabbit hole. And what's funny is 2 weekends ago at the Patriot Roundup or the QAnon conference in Dallas, I talked to someone that was very similar to him, but it was this lady. And I broke it down and like it came down to the fact that she was heartbroken by Prince dying. And so she got into QAnon because she wanted to understand who killed Prince. And it made most sense to her that the deep state took out Prince because Prince was making a documentary with Anthony Bourdain and Chester Bennington about child trafficking. So they took them all out, so the documentary would never come out.
Yeah, how much of this kind of like, which I think is really interesting one, you say Prince, Kobe Bryant, like these are public figures that have nothing to do with politics, but it's like a larger sense of when you speak to specifically Q people that they're all connected in some way. Like, is that a lot of the thinking that you're seeing? Because it's Kobe Bryant, Prince, they're largely just apolitical, you know, one's an athlete, one's a singer, right?
Atlas controlled opposition.
Yeah.
Yeah, compromised. Well, I mean, I think that for people, especially like mass media consumers or whatever, like these celebrities are like idols and they're a huge deal. So like celebrities are a big deal to people who can grow up consuming like top 40 and Hollywood stuff. So like, I think that like there's a reason that they use people like Tom Hanks and likable celebrities as these figureheads of like the cabal who, you know, drinks children's blood. Like people are like, what, Tom Hanks? Like, are you talking about who voiced Woody in fucking Toy Story? That guy is in the deep state. And that catches people by surprise. They're like, not Tom. So I think that the connection is just a lot of people love these celebrities in this world. Like they idolize certain people like Eminem and Prince. And so whoever's pulling the strings and spearheading a lot of this like conspiracy propaganda knows exactly what heartstrings to pull. And I think that celebrities are a good avenue to that.
What were these people doing before this? Like before they were going to QAnon rallies, were they just like hanging out or were they in, or did they believe like, I mean, I do think that these conspiracy theories act as like a, you know, they're medicinal on some level, or, you know, but what was the medicine they were taking before? Do you get a sense?
Lot of them? Yeah, a lot of them were just what I call trippy libertarians. A lot of them were like weed smoking, like Ron Paul libertarians who were super into stuff like UFOs and watching Illuminati videos on YouTube. Like like a lot of people in the Q universe are just like heavy weed smoking libertarian sort of style people who were already in kind of the like spiritual like rabbit hole. Like it's all vague. A lot of it's vaguely connected to like psychedelic culture, and like the drum circle at Venice Beach was like a huge QAnon spawn point. That stuff's going on. A lot of them were hyper religious, but I would say for the majority of people involved in that conspiracy movement, they were not political before 2017, before Pizzagate,
so
before that whole wave.
They were into conspiracy on some level, but not like I you know, there was that show on the History Channel that it was like about aliens who had come in the past or something like that. And I just know somebody who was into Q who was also like before Q was really into that show. I wonder if there's some, and I've run into like the Illuminati types over the years. That just
absolutely
sort of like tills the ground for them.
So I went to a Ancient Aliens convention in Dallas 2 years ago, which consequentially was at the exact same place where the QAnon convention was, same facility, like the KM Hutchinson Convention Center in downtown Dallas. And there's definitely a big crossover between believing in aliens and believing in the flat earth and believing in the Illuminati, and then believing in the deep state and then believing in QAnon and then supporting Trump. But like, I mean, alien culture seems like it'd be super chill and benign. But then you dig deep into it and you're like, who's hiding the aliens? Why are they hiding the aliens? Why do they want to control our imagination? They want to see humanity at its lowest vibration. They're satanic entities who control media. Who controls media? Boom. You're there.
Yeah, I mean, boom, right? And you mentioned satanic a lot, and like I get there's like that wellness culture, and it's usually I think 40-ish, older, 50-ish people. There's a bit of a crossover with the Q folks. But I mean, there's also a religious component to it too. The whole satanic pedophile thing, it's this existential war between good and evil, and who is the evil core of our power centers that's controlling everybody. I mean, did you get that sense? I mean, you did that coverage on Huntington Beach, but maybe it'd be different in different parts of the country. But that's another faction of Q that fascinates me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that whole like the whole blood sport, good versus evil. I mean, what's the worst thing you can possibly do in the world? Eat a kid. That's like the most evil shit you can do. And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, eating children is definitely up there. So if you can somehow convince someone that the people that they disagree with eat kids, you've already won the game. I mean, if I knew someone was eating kids, I'd be pissed off. Like, even if you can successfully convince me that someone that I think is cool is actually someone who eats kids, I'll be bummed out. I think that the apocalypse narrative is kind of over. Like I was working on a movie for the past 6 months, and I covered all the Stop the Steal stuff in DC in December and January. It should come out in the fall. And I mean, there was a sense there of like Joe Biden is going to establish leftist martial law and take us into like a communist authoritarian dictatorship within 3 months of his inauguration. I think the fact that he hasn't really done anything besides like centrist policy so far has made people be like, oh, it's on the Trump side, be like, oh, it's whatever. Like nothing that dramatic is going to happen. There's not going to be a rapture of souls. You know, the military is not going to force us to wear masks and take our guns away. But as far as the wellness culture, you know, I knew this. You guys remember what they call perineum sunning? It was like butthole sunning. It went viral. People would like go on the mountaintops.
Right. Well, they go to mountaintops and spread their cheeks to get sun in their butt.
Yeah, they believe that the sun god Ra really reaches the soul through the butthole, and they call the butthole the perineum. So they think that they're allowing like the sun god into their heart through their anus if they face their butthole toward the sun. Anyways,
and then what happens? Assuming that there's not like significant amount of pain that
there's
follows.
A video we can pull up of this.
I don't think we need to do that, but what happens after the sun enters the place where the sun don't shine, as it were? Then what happens? Good things? Like what? Flowers?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a deeply meditative experience where you like astral project and like connect with God and close your eyes and he's supposed to speak, you know, just typical.
Okay.
meditative state stuff. Anyway, so I went out to Joshua Tree in California and I did a video with these people when they were, after those videos went viral. It never came out. I don't know, like they didn't want it to come out. Maybe they didn't want their buttholes online. You know, it was fine. I went and I actually did the butthole stunning with the tribe of butthole stunners. And it was a pretty cool experience, whatever. I thought they were just like on like the hippie spectrum. A lot of them like kind of reformed Christian evangelists from Texas and Arizona who came out to California to take acid and do this perineum stunning thing. As soon as COVID hit, like all of my wellness friends who were involved with the perineum stunning out there got really red pilled and were posting like 5G anti-vax stuff like every day. And they went from posting videos of, you know, about crystals and you know, like chakras and star charts and astrology lore to posting like different stuff like every day of how, you know, the coronavirus is a plot to so-and-so. And then it got satanic, and then it started getting fused with the Q universe. And then it was basically all Q rabbit hole stuff. And then ultimately I ended up having to unfollow all my friends because after the George Floyd murder, they started posting like pictures of George Floyd on the ground. And the next slide would be like a reptile. And it would be like a side-by-side thing. It'd be like, you know, that he was a crisis actor, all that stuff. And so there was a point where I was like, holy shit, you know, 6 months ago, you guys were in Joshua Tree doing the perineum sunning on a mountaintop. And now this is where you guys are at. So I knew at that point the wellness community, because it's so interlocked with like a lot of that conspiracy stuff. Because I mean, the idea that like big pharma and, you know, mainstream food production is trying to like reduce our consciousness by putting things into our food is one of the key components of the wellness community. Is that the people who are giving us what we consume are trying to poison us.
Interesting. I mean, I think, you know, that line is that's fascinating how that slides down in there. So let me ask you this. What have you come across on the left? Is there a similar dynamic? Like what, like, you know, and it's, I mean, I guess, I mean, I don't know. You tell me if this is a fair sort of like assessment of the two sort of dynamics that are going on. On one hand, you have the, you know, the White Lives Matter sort of like, which is QAnon adjacent at times. That is, you know, sort of like the Trump supporters. And then is there a counter, like when you're talking about on the streets, right? It's basically then, is it BLM? Is it Antifa? Like what is on the other side of that ledger, and what is your assessment of them if you've dealt with them?
I mean, yeah, there's the horseshoe theory that people, especially on the right, love to talk about. You know, is it, oh, you've got the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and, you know, militant QAnon people who stormed the Capitol. But then you also got Antifa in Portland and places like Seattle, where I'm from. And I think that there is, like, person for person, if you were to take the most radical Antifa direct action Portland window breaker and pair them up with like a gnarly Proud Boy street brawler from like rural Washington. Yeah, I mean, they might give you a similar vibe in terms of like militancy and groupthink and unrealistic radical expectations. But I think the main difference is that on the group of people who are down with more radical shit is just smaller. And so scale wise, that's what you got to think about. Like a large percentage of the right wing believes the election was stolen, believes in QAnon, believes that January 6th was ultimately a good thing as like a show of force. The left, I mean, most people on the left are centrist, comfortable, middle upper class people who don't really want to see much social change. I think they're just primarily concerned with making themselves feel better, especially as gentrification goes on to destroy almost every U.S. city. I think, you know, and every condo has got pride flags and those no human is illegal signs on it. I think that to me is radical. That to me is as upsetting as stuff like White Lives Matter rally. I think like a lot of those Karen cop collars in these gentrified neighborhoods pose more of a threat to safety of people around them than like someone living out in the boonies who is part of a white supremacist chat room. So in my opinion, like what's more harmful, I think a lot of left-wing centrist stuff gentrified stuff is more harmful. But then again, I think that like the radical left, if you want to talk about like fucking gnarly ass anarchists in the Pacific Northwest, they make up such a small portion of the greater left wing. I think that like trying to compare them to White Lives Matter protesters is just a losing game.
Interesting. And so tell me, what's the plan going forward?
Well, actually, we haven't really even done like a hard launch for Channel 5 yet. Like, we've been posting videos, but I'm gonna buy like a news van and like decal it and like put a bunch of fake satellites on it and get like a new outfit with like an old school rain jacket with Channel 5 on it, like a 1990s like the reporter, and basically just hit the road again. I did a pickup artist training seminar in Las Vegas last weekend. Then the weekend before that, I did the QAnon rally in Dallas. So I'm about to go back to LA for a week or so and just edit a bunch of footage. I'm on the way back right now.
And does anybody ever try and like physically attack? You're a big guy, aren't you? I mean, you're big.
Yeah.
How tall are you?
Yeah. Well, I think 6'3".
Yeah. So no one's really gonna mess with you too much in these situations.
Yeah. Also, I mean, there's cameras rolling, so if you were to mess with me, it would make you just like look bad. I mean,
Right.
No one wants to be the interview subject who just tries to punch the interviewer. It's just embarrassing. Honestly, though, like the only place I've ever like feared for my safety is when I used to film like a lot of college, like drunk college interviews in the South back in the day, because I went to college in New Orleans. And so we used to drive up to Alabama for tailgate games. And whenever the game would get out, we would just like try to interview the losing team.
Oh, geez.
You know, because it was just interesting. You know, just like that dramatic contrast and like, we're gonna fucking win, and then you just like interview them. So like one time at the University of Alabama, like people would try to fight us, you know, like, only because they're just intimidated by like a microphone. And frat environments are the most likely place to get punched in the face as an interviewer.
Yeah, that's always been my feeling too. So how long you been doing this since through college? And then let's just briefly, I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but I've been reading up on, you had this sort of deal that you got into. You weren't terribly savvy about what you were going to sign because this like entity offered you some capital to, not a huge amount of cash to go out and do this. Do you want to just, I don't know, tell people how you got to Channel 5 as opposed to all gas, no brakes?
Yeah, so it's a pretty quick story. So All Gas, No Brakes started as a series of books and zines that I would write because I used to hitchhike around the country by myself as a teenager. And I would like tell stories about my experiences, and I would record like stories from like runaway kids, random deadbeat dads at gas stations, and just make these stories. So I called it All Gas, No Brakes. I guess a production company took a liking to it, and they said, hey, do you want to make this into a video show where you travel around? I said, yes, but you got to buy me an RV. So they're like, all right, we'll buy you an RV. And I'm 21 this time. You know, I'm just out of college. They're going to buy me an RV, give me $45K a year to just travel for free. And I could pack the RV with all my friends and just go. So I was like, yeah, they sent me a contract. I was like, I don't care what this says. I'm trying to move around. The show blew up. You know, we got like 20,000 subscribers on Patreon, and we were dropping like these dropping merch every month. And so the show was making like $500,000 a month. And so like, it was crazy. And I was only getting 20% of the profit. So I was only making like $15K a month for a huge show. I signed a movie deal 6 months ago. So I started shooting for this movie full time. And the production company who was even partnered in the movie, they were like, hey, while you're making this movie, you got to keep making Instagram content for us and keep making YouTube videos, because we can't let these Patreon numbers drop. We can't let this YouTube revenue fall while we're making the movie. And I told them I can't do that. I have to work on the movie full time. I'm locked into a 7-day shoot schedule for 6 weeks. And then so ultimately they said, no, you have to. So I said, okay, if you want me to make double content and work overtime, I need more than 20% of the money from the show. I need to be paid fairly. One thing led to another. They fired the whole team. Wow. And so we just lost All Gas, No Brakes. I lost my primary revenue source in the middle of filming for a movie. You know, I went broke real quick, basically. And so I was like, all right, 2 months ago, I was like, I was in Miami Beach, aimlessly walking around with a microphone, talking to people. And they were like, what's your show called again? What's your show called again? And I was like, I don't even want to say All Gas, No Breaks. So I just looked at them and I was like, Channel 5. They were like, from the news? I was like, yep, from the news. And my friend was like, yeah, that actually stuck pretty good. And so we launched that a couple months ago. And we're doing a hard launch in like a month or maybe a couple weeks. I'm going to get like a really funny haircut, like a crispy, more on top court date haircut. And yeah, it's going to be tight.
What does that mean?
What does that haircut mean?
Yeah.
It's like usually like the way my hair looks.
Oh.
Yeah. But even tighter on the sides, more on top.
Yeah.
So like very militant. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well,
militant.
I mean, prior to COVID, my hair was my haircut, but I'm not in any way offended. Andrew Callaghan, really great to talk with you. Really enjoy the show. And where can people see it now? I know you haven't done your hard launch yet, but if they want to see your soft launch.
They want to see my soft launch. All right. You can go on YouTube or you can look up Channel 5 with Andrew Callaghan. Mostly just YouTube. And then like we basically fund the show through Patreon. That pays our gas bills. It's going to pay for like van to get bought and wrapped. That's just Patreon Channel 5. So, but we're about to start doing like TikTok and Twitch in a couple weeks because I heard it's what the kids are into. And right. Instagram's kind of dying. Instagram's dying.
Facebook's
dead.
The
media. Facebook is dead. Like Facebook is people's grandparents. Instagram is becoming like people's parents, you know? Because the average, like,
incidentally, I just want you to know. Like,
I don't know if I'll ever get into TikTok, Andrew. Like, I mean, I think I missed the cutoff for that being cool for me.
I don't know. There's a lot of fun
stuff. Are you
stuff
27 or older?
You're not.
Are you 27?
I am 27.
27 is the TikTok cutoff.
I am 27.
27 or younger, you can still do it. You can still do it. I'm 24, and I feel like I am past the TikTok cutoff. But
no, you're my sister's
I was reminded
age,
recently
Andrew.
that it's 27.
I gotta ask you, Andrew. You said you went to college in New Orleans. Where'd you go to college?
Loyola University.
Okay, my sister is your age and went to college in New Orleans. Just went to a different school. That's why I had to ask you.
Did she go to Tulane?
She did.
What's her name?
All right, guys.
Yeah, I'll tell you later.
Oh no, yeah, you don't want to get doxxed because people dox you guys, right?
Yeah.
No,
I mean, it happens.
Yes.
It happens.
It's definitely happened. It sounds crazy. Sam, I saw who's that guy who wouldn't debate you?
Steven Crowder, Dave Rubin.
Yeah, Steven Crowder wouldn't debate you. Why?
I don't know why, to be honest with you, and I don't know if I'll ever have a chance to debate him in the future. But if you ever run into him, and he says, "Change my mind," you should tell him that he should go debate me.
Have you seen the video of him calling cops on that dude in Austin who's painting the mural on like that abandoned building?
Yes, he doesn't get the material he wants out of that guy, and so he decides that he's going to call the police on him. And the guy turned out to be had permission to go do like. But even if he didn't have permission, like what with Steven Crowder is like the graffiti police. Yeah, he's something else. He is definitely something else. But he's got very cold feet, is my understanding. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, that video is the cringiest video on the internet. I would recommend everybody watch that video.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. That was from a couple of years ago. He had another gem recently, too, when in response to the idea that there were black farmers, which apparently he found to be very hard to understand, that there would be black farmers. Probably not being aware of any of U.S. history. But Andrew Callaghan, real pleasure. Can't wait to see what you produce in that van. That is going to be pretty fun.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Thanks for having me on. I love the show.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. All right, folks. That is the free show for the day. Wow. God. Was that free? This is one of those things like where, back in the day, if we were doing this on radio, I would say like, you got to put a quarter somewhere like on on the dashboard of your car. But you don't have to do that anymore because you now have the opportunity to actually become a member of the show and support the program. And you can do so by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. when you do, you support the free show. You get the free show free of commercials, and then you get the fun half too. So join themajority.report.com. Check it out. Also, don't forget, if you're in West Virginia, there's Moral Monday pressuring Joe Manchin in West Virginia. We will put the link in our on our blog and in our podcast description, et cetera, et cetera. JustCoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Check out the Discord, majoritydiscord.com. Check out our app, majorityapp.com. All of those things are free. And additionally, amquickie.com. Matt, what is happening in the Matt Leckian media empire?
Yeah, last night on Left Reckoning, we had Joshua Kahn Russell, a TMBS regular, making his first appearance on Left Reckoning to talk about how activists killed the Keystone XL pipeline and a little bit about psychedelics and mental health. And we also talk about Ilhan Omar and Pedro Castillo's victory in Peru, as well as those trucks running into Alabama mine workers. And so check that out last night, patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get the post game where I talk about El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele making Bitcoin a legal tender in El Salvador. And he's a great example of the libertarian, I think, theory and practice being authoritarian. But patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
And also check out Nomi Show today, youtube.com/The Nomi Key Show, youtube.com/The Nomi Key Show. Also available on Twitch at the twitch.tv_the_Nomi_Key_show. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
I think I might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up. Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the fun half. We will be taking your IMs. In fact, I will prove that by taking an IM right now. We're probably not going to turn the calls on. We've only got about 45 minutes. Incidentally, and I meant to say this on the free half of the show, but on Monday, we are starting early. Did I mention that already?
I don't remember if you just told us. Or
Did I
if you
do
said
that at the
to
break?
audience.
I meant to do that at the commercial break. We're starting early on Monday at
Sam's a big shot.
11 a.m. because I am a big shot.
Mhm.
Here's a clue. Hey, Bob. I am doing 5 lines in the Bob's Burgers movie. It's not a huge role for Hugo, but he's there. It's not the world's greatest payday for a movie. It's a little surprising. I thought I was going to get a little more, but it's all right. But we're going to start the show early. We're going to end the show early because we don't go into studio for Bob's Burgers anymore. I can actually do it in the actual studio, but I need to do it in the actual studio. So Monday, early start, 11 a.m. for this program. Now let's get to the IMs. Packer Craze. Hey, MR crew. I remembered Sam has previously mentioned that he's in favor of having cops no longer do traffic stops, but instead just send tickets, etc., to people, essentially automating, streamlining the process a bit while removing most of the dangerous elements at play. Yeah, I overall agree, but do worry this could easily end up with putting even more money into deeper reliance on surveillance tech and policing, which is, of course, an issue in and of itself. Any thoughts in that area? I wasn't saying that you do it through cameras. I'm just saying if a cop sees you take an illegal left turn and there is no, run a red light or speed, they can mail you the ticket. That's it. They mail you the ticket.
But that, I mean, that's with the suggestion. That's what they're going to try to do. Is just install more cameras and surveillance.
Yeah, I maybe, but you don't have to. We can say, as a state legislature can say, certain limited number of cameras. I don't know. They get away with it in New York City, but you don't see it much around, on the highways.
Yeah.
I don't know why they do that. I don't know why they don't. I mean, but
yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like I've seen some resistance to that, but I need to look into the literature on automated cameras more.
yeah. But yes, I would worry about too much surveillance, but,
Yeah, you weren't here yesterday, Sam, but we showed the video. Not sure if you saw of that pregnant Arkansas woman who was getting pulled over by a cop, and he used a what's it called, a kit or a pit maneuver, and flipped her car. She was like going 12 miles an hour over the speed limit. It was nuts.
Yeah, she was in an area with a reduced what do you call it, on the side of the road. And so she couldn't find a place to pull. Yeah, reduced shoulder on this. And so she couldn't find a place to pull over. And the cop thought she was fleeing, even though she put her blinker on, slowed down, and had her emergency lights blinking.
Her hazards were, right.
Yeah, he eventually just did the pit maneuver, which, you get behind the rear wheel, and it spun her out and flipped the car on its roof. And he's like,
on the highway.
Yeah.
For speeding?
For speeding.
She's suing them now. I mean...
And then the cop walks up to her and he's like, why were you fleeing? And she's like, I was looking for a place to pull over. He's like, nope, you pull over when the police tell you to.
And she was maybe, 100.
I'll remember that for next time. Thank you, officer.
Yes. She was right by the exit too when he did this maneuver.
Unbelievable. Insane. These people are insane. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sam, you odious dingleberry. You look like a drunk cobbler tried to make a potato head doll with only factory rejected pieces. I will continue my campaign to get my demands until my demands are met. Get Fran Lebowitz on. Get Fran Lebowitz on. Get Fran Lebowitz on. Oh, yeah, we got to do that. Will you put that on the list, Brendan? PH Balance. I swear to God, if I don't hear Andrew's voice on this program today, I will shit my pants with disappointment. Well, PH Balance, congratulations. You do not have to buy more underwear. Right is worst. I get the sense that this is the same person because it's Sam, you unfuckable gremlin. You being single is one small win for a woman, one giant bummer for womankind. What is it like to date in your 70s anyway? What do your pickup lines sound like? Hey, baby, ever heard of the Majority Report? Pause. No. Pause. What about Ring of Fire? Pause. No. Pause. What about Who's the Caboose? Pause. No. Pause. Well, anyway, what do you do? Pause. Oh, you're a lawyer. Hey, maybe you can help me. I want to bring up a case against Trojan. Okay.
So intricate.
Yeah. What's going on with this guy? Sunset Lake puts Anarcha in the South. Sounds like Jamie needs to hawk that on the Antifada. What did I say? Arnia? What is it? What is that stuff?
Arnica.
Arnica.
Like Shelley Moore Capetto.
BB Teach. Hey, all. I raised the issue of you getting support from a postal app the other day, which you dismissed. Let me try and be clear. To the extent that the app somehow negotiates lower prices for stamps, that clearly reduces the revenue for U.S. Postal Service. Or it encourages people to use the U.S. Postal Service because, as opposed to, let's say, UPS, because it becomes more convenient. But I don't know. I don't know the data on that. If people buy stamps online, that will have a marginal negative impact on the unionized workforce, assuming you're correct. Apropos of your interview early in the week, does this also contribute to atomization? I don't think so. If people don't interact with postal workers, it makes it easier to ignore attacks on them. Bottom line. In the vast scheme of things, not a huge issue, but I think the negative impact of using the app going online outweighs the slight inconvenience of supporting your local post office. I mean, that may be the case in your instance. It's, maybe the case in sometimes for others, but I don't know. If
the postal union, issues a statement against stamps.com, we will listen to that.
Indeed. Jonathan Armstead. Sam, I'm bummed about the story about the YouTube photo copyright issue. Is that the reason for the new photos on the YouTube page? If so, I really dig those. YouTube mugging next to people is up there with Jim Carrey, my other favorite White Cast member on a 90s Fox sitcom. That is where we had to change a little bit on our
thumbnails.
Thumbnails. Thank you. Asfound Jr. Emma, it's pronounced obfuscate, not obfuscate, not obfuscate. You're still an outstanding journalist, though. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. I'm not a journalist, but I appreciate it. I think it's obfuscate. Obfuscate? That sounds wrong.
Obfuscate. Yeah. I don't know. Emma is contractually obligated to mispronounce a certain number of words a month so that I don't look bad.
Right. Well, I mean, that was a part of the negotiations before I started.
Does anybody confuse the meaning when somebody says obfuscate? Like, I think you can pronounce it obfuscate.
There you go.
So am I wrong though?
Did you not get an M?
I mean, that's how I pronounce it. I scored extremely high on whatever the graduate verbal exam was. So yeah, like 98th percentile. And so that qualifies me to say grammar is made up, classist, as is this pronunciation policing.
Are you saying what do you mean graduate? Are you talking about the SAT?
No, the one that I needed to get into masters. I forget what it's called now.
Gotcha.
GRE.
Yeah, that's it.
GRE.
Mr. Miyagi, I appreciate all the stimulus money given to those, but this inflation is giving me a Jimmy Carter 70s vibe. People need to go back to work. That is absurd. To the extent that we have inflation, which is over the past couple of months, we've had some pretty serious inflation. It is impossible to imagine that it's not a function of production not being able to ramp up as quickly to its normal capacity as demand had, right? Because I can tell you, just like, I went out to dinner for the first time in a restaurant in a year and a half last night. And this is the way it works. Like, it's starting to happen, throughout New York State. In New York, people are taking their masks off, like almost overnight. People are like, I'm going to go re-engage with restaurants, let's just say.
I mean, I did a masked off workout class where everyone was vaccinated. It was a incredible experience, but like crazy. But now I'm completely back to used to it, Anyway.
But it's much easier for us to make the decision, like, I'm going to go to a restaurant or I'm going to go to a gym class or whatever it is, than the restaurant or the gym class to say, like, oh, now I'm going to be able to ramp back up, just in terms of, like, to get back to where, like, demand can shoot up much quicker than supply can. And it's not that, I mean, we can get in our society to a point where there's too much money for our capacity to supply. But right now, our capacity to supply is not the problem. It is just our ability to ramp it up in time. And we're going to, the production capacity is going to catch back up. It may take a little bit more time, but there is no evidence that we are outstripping production capacity. We are outstripping production ability in the short run, but that's just because it takes longer time to ramp up production than it does ramp up demand. It's not because once we have that fully ramped up that we won't have the capacity to meet demand. It's just, there's no evidence to the contrary that would be, and that is the most obvious explanation, right? I mean, what we're going through right now is essentially the toilet paper situation, but for everything, because there was suddenly like a ramped up demand for residential toilet paper, because everybody's at home as opposed to going into work. And there was just there was no capacity for that. But it's not like we don't have the ability to produce enough toilet paper. We do. It's just that dramatic shift was so quick that there wasn't time to meet it. Nerd Cheetah. At some point, you'd think the Democrats would explicitly call out the right's pro-life hypocrisy, especially when it comes to their abject intolerance and inhumanity in other areas than fetal. Problem is that Democrats almost seem more quietly okay with inhumanity. Brandon Sutton's Barbell Brotherhood. Sam, I don't want to get out ahead of my skis here, but I think it's time to go get another bite at the apple insofar as this self-licking ice cream cone. All right, I get you. Point taken.
It's baked into the cake.
I got a couple of go-tos. This was fun. At the Hill Rising show, Crystal Ball and Sagar, I don't know the guy's last name. Andretti, have struck out on their own. They have a new show. I don't know if it's launched yet. But so Ryan Grimm, I don't know if he's filling in or it's permanent or what, or they're doing one of those like, rolling auditions. But he's on with Emily Jashinsky. Who is Emily Jashinsky? Do we know?
She's formerly of the Federalist.
Okay, so she's a right winger,
or she is at the Federalist. Not sure, right?
Yeah, she's a right winger, and this exchange was really interesting because I grew up with Hannity and Combs. Now, both Hannity and Combs, not very bright, but Hannity was much like stronger-willed, and Combs was always outmatched. So Combs was sort of like the Washington Generals to the what do you call it? The Globetrotters, the Harlem Globetrotters. And it's nice to see the left have like the goods and the right, presumably this person's an editor at the Federalist. They should be top notch, but watch this.
Wow.
Yes, watch this because perhaps not.
Yeah, maybe.
Anywhere at the global map, and you can probably find.
Hold on, I'm sorry.
At
pause
some
it.
point.
We should just give context. This is a conversation about Ilhan Omar's tweet where she, they have a debate essentially about.
And just to be clear, Ilhan Omar's tweet was basically saying, look, the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court should apply to everybody who has committed, atrocities. And whether you're, the Taliban or America, you have atrocities. They're not necessarily equating them, but they have all crossed a certain.
Well, if
threshold.
she were to equate them, I mean, the body count for I don't even. It's just
right.
Let's just pay attention to it.
In Vietnam, or just in Congo, or just you could throw a dart anywhere at the global map, and you can probably find, at some point throughout the 20th century, the U.S. intervening to undermine, some type of social democratic effort and backing the most vicious right-wing elements. And the irony of them calling this anti-Semitism when the U.S. very consciously and explicitly out of World War II, allied itself with former Nazis, helped Nazis escape justice, was complicit in what was called the rat line, with getting Nazis out of Germany and into these death squads that were run by the United States and deployed in an anti-communist fashion against the Soviet Union and against leftist elements in South America.
But who ended the Holocaust? I mean, what country?
The Soviet Union, actually.
Okay, but
I mean, the Soviet Union did that.
No,
we walked in after the Russians had suffered 20+ million casualties and marched into Germany.
Sure, but without the United States' intervention, a heck of a lot more people would have died in that atrocity.
Yes, and I'm glad the Soviet Union and the United States allied to beat Nazi Germany, but the Nazi Germany, the Nazis themselves then allied with the United States to go after the Soviet Union and to go after communist and social democratic elements in South America. That's an actual part of the history.
Right, but again, there's lives being saved in that process, a lot of lives being saved in that process, and a lot of Americans putting their lives on the line and dying to save those lives.
Sure, but many fewer than Soviet lives died to take on the Nazis.
But that doesn't change the fact that the United States intervened and risked lots and lots of lives compared to what it may have been complicit in or what it may have been, lives it may have costed on the other side of that. I think, again, the balance there is clearly on the side of good in a way that you can't apply to the Taliban or Hamas. I would much rather have I would take the establishment government of the United States over the governing forces and the establishment of the Taliban any day. I'm glad we're in the American empire, not the Taliban empire.
Wait till you hear who funded the Taliban at the very beginning.
Well,
or Hamas, to say.
Yeah. And Hamas, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, while we're at it, first off, that was it was almost like cruel to watch.
Yeah.
Thank you, Federalist, for your talent.
Like a cat with a bird.
Basic elements of 20th century history. And it's, these are not obscure facts. The Soviet Union's role in World War II, this is not obscure.
The liberation of Auschwitz, etc.
This is even like a cursory, like when I was a kid, we had encyclopedias, and that's like the Wikipedia version, like the Wikipedia version. Like, just look it up in Wikipedia.
I mean, her laugh is really amazing.
She's nervous. She's nervous.
I would imagine so. And yes, Grim is right. It is the United States that created the Taliban by funding madrasas in Pakistan so that there would be a counterbalance to the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. This is not controversial or, frankly, very obscure either.
And part of the same project that he was pointing out to her about the relationship with Nazis post-World War II.
Yes. It's a similar,
anti-communist project.
Exactly.
Yes.
Hamas.
Same CIA.
Hamas was created and helped, the creation of which was midwifed, I think you could say, by Israel as a counterbalance to the PLO, or what ultimately is now sort of referred to as the Palestinian Authority. And so a certain basic amount of history would be in order, I think, if you're going to comment on these things. It's pretty stunning.
Well, but similarly to the response to Ilhan Omar's line of questioning of Tony Blinken and of like her tweet that kind of summarized where her question was coming from, they are so terrified of being ripped out of American exceptionalism and this cozy blanket of we are this force of good. She keeps trying to return to it, and Ryan wasn't giving her what she wanted to hear, essentially. And it's just so childish in its very, purest form.
And let me just say, even if you believe that the United States is a net good in the world, and I think there is an argument for that, the idea that excuses atrocities or killings of civilians is just absurd. I mean, the idea that if you think that America has been a net good in the history of the world, and it's debatable, but just even if I stipulate that, does that mean that the United States should not be held to account for actions that are not good? I mean, just to make it really simple, I mean, it's just bizarre.
Well, Bill Hemmer, what we played earlier in the show. They want flag waving, and that's the reality of like what is at the core of this. It's wanting to feel okay and completely cozy in one's nationalism and American exceptionalist perspective. It's so facile.
It is. I used to talk about Rush Limbaugh this way. Now that he's dead, I don't feel any differently about talking about it this way. But his job was to take any doubt that a conservative would have in their mind about anything and erase it. And erase it in a way that say like doubt in and of itself is bad. I mean, that's what Bill Hemmer is crying for there. It's like, is it really hard to find flag waving in America? I mean, honestly, like, is it really hard to find expressions of American exceptionalism? No,
all
of
I
course
see is
not.
Antifa burning flags. I don't know what America you live in.
Like Bill Hemmer, the idea is like that we need that, like what he resents is not that there is a net, there is an overwhelming amount of non-flag waving. It's that there has to be only flag waving. There cannot be even anything to crack open a slight bit about a doubt about who we are or what we do in every circumstance at every time, because it begins to shake their fundamentalism. I mean, ultimately, that's what this is about. It is about their fundamentalism.
A fundamentalism of American exceptionalism and just like, it's the reason I'm adding on to it is just because it's religious in that very, in its fervor.
You can have market fundamentalism. You can have this American exceptionalism fundamentalism. It is a fundamentalism that they are afraid of allowing any doubt to creep in because that begins to undercut the premise of what they're talking about. Let's go. But that was fun. I mean, if that happens on a regular basis,
I'm going to start watching Rising.
I love Ryan's delivery too, right? He's so precise and calm. And it's just, what a guy.
Here is Tucker Carlson on with Victor David Hanson. Oh wait, who is this dude? Victor David Hanson. I remember
at the Hoover Institute.
Yeah, he's an oldie, but goodie. And here he is. They are, again, this is Tucker sort of talking about, on some level, religious fundamentalism without using the words. and how even the existence of someone who is not following the religious edicts of what, how they should act within the context of a family union and what the purpose of women are in our world, even the existence of someone not towing that line becomes the source of offense and complaint.
It's quickly, do you find it interesting that they are so offended by fertility and nature and the idea that people reproduce and that's okay, that we men and women come together and create new life? Like the whole thing is repulsive to them. Why is that?
Well, I think it's because it started with the feminist movement that they felt that impaired a woman's future. But I think it also reflects reality, Tucker, that the age when people are getting married, having children, buying a home, buying a house has gone from mid-20s to mid-30s. And our crisis right now is that we're not reproducing ourselves. We're about 1.8 rather than 2.1 or 2. And we're suffering from what? Prolonged adolescence. These children, or they have adult bodies, but they have the minds of children. They don't want to grow up. AOC is a good example of a person who's suffering from prolonged adolescence. And she said she doesn't want to have children because of climate change. So it's a phenomenon. I don't know if it's because of $1.7 trillion in student debt or the economy, but they just don't want to take off their training wheels and go out and experience life and its adventures and dangers.
Yeah, it's sad. Even sad for Sandy Cortez, kind of missing the best part, the fun part, I think.
It is.
Stop.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is the
hold off on the Sandy Cortez for a second. Just
I wasn't gonna. Yeah, go on.
How absurd and just obsessed are they with her, though, that a 31-year-old woman who is now in her second term of Congress is living an extended adolescence? How dripping with hatred of women do you have to be to perceive a 2-term congresswoman at age 31 to be living an extended adolescence? This is it's bizarre. Unless you understand that there's no one repulsed by fertility. They have to create that straw man because Tucker Carlson cannot say the job of a woman is, in his opinion, to be fertilized and put out a baby. That is it. They are not doing their biological, God-given role in society unless they are doing that. And he has to make it like they're offended by people who might have children, because otherwise Tucker actually has to expose the fact that he is offended by the fact that they are not following his fundamentalist religious version of the way that humans should exist.
The quote that she said was, "I speak to you as a human being, a woman whose dreams of motherhood now taste bittersweet because of what I know about our children's future, and that our actions are responsible for bringing the most dire possibilities into focus in relation to climate change." She did not say she wasn't going to have kids. She was saying that she feels anxiety about having kids because of the climate crisis, which is, by the way, a sentiment that is shared by a lot of people in our generation. That's just the facts of the matter. And one, they're deranged and obsessed with her. The fact that he's talking about her fertility so cavalierly and her personal decision to have a baby goes to the underlying theme that I keep talking about, that they are obsessed with her in an unhealthily, sexual way. That is the undercurrent of a lot of this. And also, the right wing is the one that's obsessed and repulsed by fertility, or even having conversations about sex or fertility. Because, women on the left, we want to have our own choices, and they don't even want it to be a conversation because their view of how women should be addressing their own reproductive systems is so narrow. So, I mean, if anyone's repulsed by fertility, it's the right wing, because they don't even want to see it as a complex issue that's very personal to women. It has to be top down, etc.
This is, this is the playbook is, and we're seeing this on a national level with things like, even the Supreme Court, rulings where religious freedom is imposed if other people don't function in a religious way. That is where we're headed with this. They've been heading that way for a long time, a real long time. Shall we check in on Dave Rubin? Here's Dave Rubin. He is now the Bernie police. This is another example of, I'm going to create a straw man, and then I'm going to criticize the people. I'm going to criticize the straw man for not being made of straw. Or wait, do I got that right? Let's watch this.
LA has a certain version of that as well. We brought in the former DA, this guy, George Gascon, who ruined San Francisco. Well, now he's our DA in Los Angeles. Of course, he's Bernie backed, and he's a straight white guy who deposed our first ever black female DA. Now, I don't care about identity politics, but you would think that Bernie wouldn't be backing a straight white guy against our first ever black female DA. She was far better than him, by the way.
But the fact that he backed the white guy proves that he doesn't care about it. So why the hell are you making this comment?
Here's my straw man, and I'm going to build up the straw man by showing that the guy who I accuse of propping up the straw man is in fact not propping up the straw man.
The guy that exhibited the exact kind of behavior that I would like. I'm going to criticize him for doing that, which is backing the white guy as opposed to the black, what was it, DA?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we of course know Dave Rubin's entire existence is an identity proposition. That's his whole media brand. What's the guy that fetishizes ideas? What's an idea that's originated from this guy?
Well, the idea that
liberals left is going crazy.
Yeah, the left has gone crazy. The left has left me. That is his idea. That was basically it. Oh, he also came up with a monetization platform.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Frank?
Locals.
Oh, locals. Whose is Frank?
I don't know.
I must say,
shoot. Go on. Matt.
That's not permeating. I don't think. I haven't seen a whole lot of Frank talk out in the world. And I even followed
the My Pillow guy.
There's no Frank talk because people are afraid to speak their mind because of cancel.
Let's go back to some IMs here. Josh from Connecticut. Hey, Sam, weird law question here, but about 18 months ago, my employer switched my healthcare. He received a call from a salesman saying he worked up for my previous healthcare provider and claimed the new company was going out of business. We switched the new company was now working for and could get us a cheaper deal for the same coverage. My employer switched. We found out not only was this new company a health share ministry, but that also our previous healthcare company was not going out of business, and we were lied to. After weeks of complaining on the phone with the company on every social media outlet, I was finally called by a lawyer representing the health share. I was told I could receive a full refund for my contribution, but I need to sign a release. It seems like an NDA, and delete every complaint I've made about the company on social media within 5 days of payment. I'm looking into sending this story to a lawyer, but what else should I do? Oh, I would go see a labor lawyer. I would see a labor lawyer. That's what I would do. And I would not sign that document yet, because if they're offering it to you now, they'll offer it to you later. They obviously don't want a big deal. They don't want the bad publicity. Pretty good lefty. Can we consider the possibility that Dore is a COINTELPRO-like plant that exists simply to split the left and help Republicans, conservatives win and diminish voting on the left? P.S. He talks about you all the time, but never says your name. Calls you the lib show host who works for Peacock and MSNBC. That's very sweet of him. He is, could there be anything more cowardly than what he does? But yes, I don't think he's actually a plant, but I think it's just really more of like, I think he supports a lot of stuff like that. There was a great story that read about TPUSA having a PR firm that was associated with a TPUSA that was promoting green candidates in the run-up to the 2018 election online and trying to basically, I don't know, support everything that Jimmy Dore was doing. Not necessarily he's implicated in that, but I would love to see what those where those bots were deployed online. But I think Dore is just like more of a, you know, some of it is that he's a little bit pickled. Some of it is he's, you know, was humiliated on this show 5 years ago, and I will not let him forget that. And that hurts, I think, for him. So I think that's a big part of the problem. Why does every reporter ask Manchin the same exact question about getting rid of the filibuster? Seems pretty obvious to me. The interviewer should start by saying, so you made it very clear that you want to reform the filibuster you want to make the filibuster more painful with common sense reform. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know why they don't ask him the right questions. I don't know if that makes a difference in the final analysis. Sam, I genuinely want to know, when was the last time you took part in a protest on the street? Or if not that, when was the last time you called your legislature? Last summer. And I don't know the last time I called a lawmaker. Maybe in the fall. I don't know. Whenever we actually talk about it, I do that. That's that. Peachy Keen, thanks for including me on the MR crew on the side of the video when you play clips. Now I don't have to worry about strangers thinking I'm watching Dave Rubin Raw. I ordered End of the Road from a thrift book site and wrote everyone else's fiction book recommendation down. So thanks for that. Bionic
No
Barry.
problem.
Per the interview on Wednesday, he seemed to be making up an argument I heard many times growing up in Catholic school. The gist was essentially, what would stop us all from being rapists and murderers if it weren't for our religion? Even before I left religion, I recognized that as a ridiculous argument. Shouldn't simple common humanity be enough for these people? Why do people need to be American for us to have compassion for them? In my opinion, their simple humanity is reason enough. I mean, I agree with that assessment. My issue with what Judas was saying was, all right, it's not unreasonable to stipulate if the Democratic Party supports immigrants having right to health care in this country, then it will lose votes. But if you're going to make that analysis, you know, substantiate on that. Like, where's the data that suggests that? Just as a political matter and as a policy matter, I don't think that's true at all, frankly. I mean, we end up paying for this stuff in emergency rooms. And so, like, there's no reason to believe that Medicare for All couldn't support undocumented immigrants. It's absurd. I mean, at least I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of any research on that accord at all. So, I mean, I understand the idea of you're creating more competition for low-wage workers. Although I think what we've seen recently is that, you know, if you raise your minimum wage to $15 an hour, you get a lot more people. So, you know, presumably, I guess, you know, I mean, if these people were given a path to citizenship and had the same protections as other workers, I mean, I guess there'd be more competition at the low end wage. But if you also bring in Medicare for All, the relevance of wages wouldn't be as dire, frankly. I mean, what would be the value of healthcare to these people? And we could also just have minimum wage. So I just think that he was making assertions and wasn't, but I agree with what you're saying. But in general, I think the real problem was he was just making assertions, not backing these up. Sam's eczema. Hearing anything about cinema raised my blood pressure because I knew her back in the day when she pandered to anarchists. It's deeply personal for me, and now it's time for some Sunset Lake. Denver Dave, Sam, when you finally decide to get the chuck out, I hope you hire David Sirota to work for your U.S. Senate run. Jimmy Dorable. The pessimistic reality is the Dems can still fundraise even when they lose, but any structural change to solve any problems affects their fundraising capability. I don't think they're afraid to fundraise. I don't think that's the case. I think the first half is true, but the second half, I think that doesn't make sense to me. I think there are other factors that prevent them from doing it. None that are any less sort of like depressing, but I just don't think that's what it is. Man gave names to all the animals. Why would someone no longer want to be a senator? It seems like one of the cushiest jobs possible, because you can make more, lobbying your Senate buddies. Trench warfare today makes me think of eternal reoccurrence. Lancelot. Sam, what do you think about David's idea about holding the vote and putting pressure on progressives that they do so until important bills come up? I think you misheard what David was saying. I think he was saying threatening a vote for an actual substance in a bill, I think, is a good idea in circumstances. I think that you got to weigh what the value of getting something in and your chances to getting it and the cost associated with the holding up a bill. But yeah, I made it clear the problem with the force of the vote was the ask. I thought was stupid from the day I actually promoted it. The day I actually echoed it in a positive way, my only hesitation was the ask was stupid.
Yeah.
And the ask was and remains stupid. The idea of leveraging your vote at certain times makes total sense to me. And I don't know, frankly, if I would have done it with the COVID relief bill, because the political liability is much higher. There's a lot more pressure. But I am for doing it with the infrastructure. Traffic cone. And it really depends on what are you getting? What are you going to try and get into the bill? Well, how much? Who are your allies in this? Are you out there alone? The idea that you have people in the Senate and the House who could possibly do that is a big difference. Traffic cone. Sam, if you were given a chance to debate Ben Shapiro, would you want to? Is there such a thing as winning a debate against someone whose main strategy is to lie as fast as possible? It's not a question of, yes, I would debate him on whether he's the king of the Jews for first thing. But I think is there value there? I think you can have the opportunity at times to convert people to a different perspective or begin that journey, as it were.
Coming from a certain perspective, there's no value for Anderson Cooper trying to debate Ben Shapiro, but for someone like you, yeah,
exactly. Yes, definitely. He's still at this again, Tucker Carlson, with the VAERS data. All right, well, let's go to Ron Paul, though. This is fun. They wheeled Ron Paul out. He's at the Bitcoin conference, and
which is the new identity for libertarians.
Yes. And here he is saying COVID was made up for entertainment purposes. And this is the shot. We'll give you the chase here in a minute.
Never. They're not going to do it. So this is going to continue. And then you throw in, the pandemic, that thing that they created for entertainment purposes. And this has made people very, very concerned. I do believe that the Congress is not going to come around and make sense. There's too many special interests. You know, we've had this even before the pandemic was manufactured. The Fed was already in trouble. You know,
Yawn.
This is at the Bitcoin conference in Miami, which let's pull up this headline. Wow, they tested positive for COVID after the Miami event. I wonder why that. I wonder how that happened. I guess they were just like bored and needed something for entertainment.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wish the entertainment venues that closed down and really suffered during the pandemic and needed aid from the government got the memo that COVID was meant to be entertainment. They could have gotten in on that, you know?
I wonder if Ron Paul's concerned at all, or if he's actually been vaccinated.
Honestly, he's such a nut that I would guess that he actually hasn't been.
I'm not so sure. He's also a businessman. He's also a businessman. If he thinks it's in his best interest to say that about, I think he would, frankly.
So is this, though, like the new iteration of libertarianism? We talked a little bit about it before the show, but now they're just going to be hawking Bitcoin and identify as, you know, Bitcoin traders and all that gold standard stuff.
I think it's always been, that's always been, gold standard stuff was always part of the equation. I mean, I think that's always been, I just think that this is where they're getting where they're paying more attention to, because there's money to be made. But it's going to be interesting to see if, like, in 6 months to 12 months, if there's going to be any ideological libertarians who are more interested in like their ideology than just, like, you know, making crypto money.
I think where you see it a lot is the decentralization fetish that Bitcoin proponents have. And if this wasn't in an era where capitalism is basically discredited, it'd be called a privatization of the currency, not a decentralization of it. But that's what it is. It's privatization of currency.
That's Matt, so well said.
Let's check in on Fox and Friends. Have they got the memo yet that everything is critical race theories?
I think they have.
Let's check in to see if they've got the memo that everything that is nefarious is a critical race theory. They just
skin color, you're either an oppressor or you're a victim. One of the hot spots for this debate is Loudoun County, which is just to the west of Washington, D.C. And over the last couple of days, there was a Loudoun County mom whose son graduated from Loudoun County High School in 2015. Her name is Xi Van Fleet, and she survived and escaped China after the revolution. Remember, 20 million people died in that revolution. She ripped the school board the other night and said it's a form of neo-racism. She was very brave standing in front of those people, and this is a little bit about what she had to say about what the school board was doing to their kids.
Growing up in Mao's China, all this seemed very familiar. The communist regime used the same critical theory to divide people. The only difference is they use class instead of race. During the Cultural Revolution, I witnessed students and teachers turn against each other. We changed school names to be politically correct. We were taught to denounce our heritage. The Red Guards destroy anything that is not communist. This is indeed the American version of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. The critical race theory has its roots in cultural Marxism. It should have no place in our schools.
So she's saying, let's not make the same mistake here.
So what you see is the Chinese also spending a ton of money to do just what she's saying they did then. They are in every aspect of our system, the college system, education system, the political system. The smallest congressman, the biggest university, the biggest school like the University of Texas. I would not be surprised if they are somehow pushing an agenda through willing surrogates that is helping to destroy our country, first and foremost in our school system, which is outraging us currently right now.
Ding,
My
ding, ding.
fear is we're going to get used to it.
She said the difference is that was about class. This is about race. You had another teacher from Fairfax County, right next door to Loudoun County, who came over to the school board meeting, and she got a roaring ovation after she spoke. They clipped her mic at the end after so many minutes. But she said that critical race teaches kids to root for socialism and to judge people by the color of their skin.
That's right.
We're seeing this all around the country. The New Jersey teacher that quit her job.
And look at the states that have banned it. You got Arkansas, Idaho, Iowa, Montana, Oklahoma, and Tennessee.
Florida's voting on it.
Yeah,
today.
Yeah, I mean, so this is the final.
The Chinese are sneaking the critical race theory into our school.
But they're melding it, right? Because, you know, I know, like, there's people in my life who watch Fox News and they're just like, oh, the Chinese Communist Party. Like, they're getting my information. So there's a lot of that. And then there's a lot of critical race theory we're hearing about. No one can really define it. No one knows what it is, but it's just it's very bad. So, like, now melded into one. Perfect Fox conspiracy.
Just to be clear, I've gone over this in the past. Critical race theory has existed for probably at least 40 years. When I went to law school in 1991, we had critical legal theory that we were taught. Critical race studies was a legal doctrine. It is a way in which to examine the law, not based on the legal principles that go into the creation of law, but the
i.e. a fundamentalist approach, I would call. Wouldn't that be similar to a fundamentalist approach of law? Like where you
What's
don't
that?
look at anything outside? Like
they called it classical. They called it classical legal thought.
Right.
And in fact, Brandeis, you go back as far as like the Brandeis brief when it came to things like child labor and 40-hour work week, as he was litigating at the Supreme Court. The Brandeis brief became synonymous with like actually looking at the outcomes of law. What does the law actually do in practice? And this is what this doctrine was. It was like, how do we assess what this law actually does? And one of the critical legal theory, I guess subsets, it's critical race theories, which was to assess how laws impact racial dynamics. It has nothing to do with what is going on in Loudoun County, which is talking about racial equity. And
can we just say, like, Virginia, like the idea that the problem with Virginia textbooks is like too much communism is just laughable given the history of education in that state particularly. Like it's pretty gross. Like the Mao, this is Maoist now. As like, did we ever follow up on the body cameras for teachers? Is that a real thing or was that a joke?
Oh yeah, that is it was just really just one person. I have that here actually. It's on Christian Newswire.
Oh nice.
With more and more teachers choosing indoctrination over education. This is just like the oldest story that the right has been pursuing for years. Parents in Washoe County School District have become frustrated with the lack of transparency. And apparently one person said we should maybe, one parent's rights activist has a novel proposal. Make teachers wear body cameras so they can spy on the teachers when they teach the kids. Oh,
yeah.
God.
Where's the Maoism?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
What they understand as Maoism.
All right, we got a bunch of IMs. Let me do 5 and then we're out of here. Juggernaut Magnum, thank you once again for having the best guest list on YouTube. What Andrew Callaghan is doing is important as Sirota because he's talking about what's coming. Yeah, that's a good point. Bob Dork, Sam, turn on the phone. Some loser MRA wants to chat. All right, Monday, or I guess, yeah, maybe Tuesday, because we're going to have a shortened fun half on Monday. Trump Knuckle. Have you guys seen Steven Crowder bits? The police polite racist is long, but I've never been able to figure out the message. I haven't. Moon in the Lake, send a link at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Hansen, Carlson, it isn't looking that good for us Scandinavians. By the way, if AOC ever does have a kid, they'll attack her for that too. Tucker wasn't repulsed by people with melanin having kids. And the final IM of the week, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. It is stop the meal. How long before teaching about Rosa Parks in history class is critical race theory to these guys? I would guess not very long. Matt, Brendan, Emma, great job this week. We will see you on Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made for the option where you